Hey everybody, it's Dick here. Today I am talking to you about the Mutt. The Mutt is still in the fleet. We briefly had it for sale, and when my daughter Titty learned about us putting it for sale, she protested and said that she wanted it, and she started her motorcycle training on it. And not soon after her starting her motorcycle training did she crash it and get a nice little divot there with her knee or foot or whatever when she low-sided it and came off the bike. The low-side crash of the Mutt has given me license to now put a little crash protection on this and maybe make this into a bit of a dual sport. I have gotten bitten by the dual sport bug by taking a ride out on my buddy Radar's CRF 250L, and I do not have the budget at the moment to buy my own dual sport or trail bike. I need a dual sport because I don't live near the trails, I don't have a trailer, and I don't have a place or facility to trailer bike out to the trails and then be able to bring it back. So I need a bike that can be road legal and then ride on the trails. Now this came with funny knobby tires. These are not off-road tires, these are just knobby tires, and the lack of a sidewall tread or kind of a more aggressive tread at the edge of the sidewall here, and the fact that these are kind of close together means that if I hit any mud, these are just going to pack with mud and become slicks. So although they look the part, these are not proper green laning off-road tires. When we did buy this bike, this is the Hilts, the Mutt Hilts 2018, it came with this grill here, which again is for show, but I did insist that they put on the steel bash plate there, so I'm a bit ahead of the game with the steel bash plate. Other than the kind of divot there, it is pretty much in mint condition and it has very low miles. I'm going to do what I can to modify this so that this can be my holdover dual sport until until Father's Day rolls around again. And that's going to be the eye for the next bike in the fleet is some sort of dual sport. Now I have a dream of a kind of 250L or a WR 250, but I've also been bit by the new CT125 Hunter Cub online, and if it does come to the UK, that will be a serious contender for some sort of inappropriate green laning. But for now, I have the 125 Mutt Hilts, which is just, the only reason they call it a Hilts is because they give it a different color and did some crap up here. It's the same thing as the Mongrel, it's the same thing as the Sabbath. They changed the names for the paint jobs and nothing more. So I'm going to do my best to modify this, and to the end of modifying this, I have purchased some parts. What I'm going to do is do a number of videos as we modify this into a bit of a Mad Max don't care if I drop it machine. As it is, if I was to do any more, I don't know if Fannie knows about the divot there. I'm pretty sure she doesn't, because it's nice and low when you're standing up and looking at it. But if I don't do anything to the bike as it is, and I bring it out even for a day of green laning with Radar, it's going to come back with some road rash and with some damage. So I'm going to get some protection on it, change some of the more precious parts that will show damage, and hopefully hold off the wrath. Also make it a bit more appropriate to having Titty, Dickie, and eventually Tootie learning to ride motorcycles. One of the main concerns that Radar has about this bike being used as a green laner is this fender. There's not a lot of, when these catch mud, it's going to kick right up into there, and there's not a lot of clearance there even to begin with. So we're going to lose this fender, and I've picked up one of these dirt bike fenders. This is a universal MX style fender. I measured the space between these fork gaiters here, and this universal fender slides right in there. It's going to have to mount up there. I was a bit nervous about figuring out how to mount it. It comes with these grids here so that you can make symmetrical drill holes, but I was worried about what was going to happen under here. But fortunately, and I don't know if I can get the camera up there, but fortunately there's a pre-drilled tapped hole there, there, and there, and they are M8 bolts. So I don't have to do very much modification to the crown. I don't know if the single one at the front is going to be enough, especially when I crash, which I will. So I'm thinking of putting a brace across here. It will sit kind of like that, and that will give plenty of clearance. It's an 18-inch front wheel with a big kind of 2 or 2.5 inch sidewall here, so kind of rolling at 21 inches. So that's the major modification at the front there. Oh, I should say, because I don't have a budget for a new dual sport, I'm not going to put a lot of money into the Mutt. What kills me is this was Fannie's learner bike, and the Mutt Hilts is one of the most expensive Mutts you can buy. It's about 3,500 pounds. For 3,500 pounds, I could buy a very lightly used CRF 250L. So I'm kicking myself that her learner bike was so precious, but she bought it aesthetically. She wanted a bike that would encourage her to ride. She's very much about the style of motorcycling, which is why she's ended up on an Indian, even though the Indian outperforms any one of my bikes. But the Mutt was definitely an aesthetic choice, and she learned very quickly the limitations of this bike. I am looking at this as what it is, which is a Chinese Suzuki clone, and without all of the Birmingham dress up and makeup, it is a very utilitarian bike, and there are people in the developing world and developing countries who use these as workhorses. So I think this is probably more capable than people in the West, including myself, give it credit for. And so because I don't have the budget to replace this or to buy a new bike at the same price point, I am going the economy route to make this as cheap as possible. So although I'm making modifications to the bike, it's definitely very much on a shoestring budget at this point. The fender was 17 quid. It's free shipping. I don't have to do anything under there because of the bolts. I'm very much looking for an economic way of making what I have into what I want. Another one of the limitations to this bike being a competent dual sport or green laner, other than the wheels and the tires, is the suspension. This suspension is, I don't even know what the travel on the front suspension is, and there aren't a lot of options, well, economic options of giving that any more travel up front. In the rear, however, even on the road riding I've done, I have found the limitations of this suspension. Mutt is not the only company importing these Suzuki clones or these Chinese clones into the country, and Sinus is one of the companies, along with Lexmoto and Bullet and Heritage, who are doing various things here. But Sinus is one of these companies who will make a bit more modifications to the bikes than the aesthetic choices that Mutt is making. And one of the things they're doing is they make a scrambler, and their scrambler has a longer suspension at the rear. So I have found someone who has parted out their Sinus scrambler, and they've sold me these Sinus scrambler shocks, and I will get a considerable increase in the rear suspension. Now, I know that that is going to affect the chain line. I already have an issue with the chain line rubbing along this kind of rubber gasket here for how short this swing arm is and this current suspension, so I don't know what's going to happen with the chain line run. I also know that jacking up the back of the bike is going to make the steering act a bit differently, but I'm hoping that the longer suspension, looks like I'll get, that's a cowl, that's a spring. There's a spring up there, so the springs probably go to there, so it looks like I'll get about an inch or so, and these are progressive, so I'm hoping that that won't be a detriment to the bike, but that will be an addition to the bike, and hoping that a bit of change in suspension is going to give me some advantage on the trails. The crash with my daughter pointed out the vulnerability of these stock, non-adjustable, cheap levers. Other than the kind of adventure bike hacks that I know that these are very vulnerable. So I have opted to get some of the Acerbis X Factory handguards. These can be quite precious. These are about 80 to 100 quid depending on where you buy them. But if you're not too worried about the color, you can get these for a bit of a bargain. So I got these on closeout for 40 quid. When I bought them, I thought I might just plasti dip them black, but that might be the option, so people see me coming. That's the solution for some handguard protection. It looks like I might have a clearance issue with this anyway. Might have to move that in on the bar a little bit, but that's going to be my handguard solution. With an eye towards crash protection, I have been staring at this bike for quite a while. The pot metal braces that come out for the foot pegs seem to me like these are very vulnerable, that these can probably easily snap. I don't know what the resolution is to this Royal Enfield style hooped brake lever, steel brake lever that goes all the way back up to that mechanism there. That sits lower than the bash plate, so that's obviously taken some abuse. I don't know what kind of alternative foot pegs are available for this contraption. Another glaring issue is this exhaust. It sits out high, it sits out farther than the bash plate and about as low. This is vulnerable. With an eye towards protecting as much as I could here, one of the companies I didn't mention before was MASH, which is a French company that's doing a lot with these type of Chinese clones. And I bought some engine bars for the MASH 79 or 72 or whatever they're calling their version of this. Unfortunately, the instructions weren't available online. They weren't that expensive, but now that I have them here, I see that they bolt in on that bolt there, but my bash plate is in the way for that mounting bolt there. So either I have to figure out how to modify the bash plate so that can slide in between there, or I have to choose between an engine guard or a bash plate. If I can figure out this engine guard, it does give me a little more protection. That's one thing there. The other thing I noticed when I was touring, when I dropped my bike a couple of times when I was touring, is that my luggage racks did a wondrous job of acting as crash protection. So again, MASH is offering one of the few luggage rack solutions for these bikes, and although that's not much, that would be a little bit of caging around the turn signal, and that combined with my crappy new shocks might save a little bit of face. So with the luggage racks, the engine guard, skid plate, front fender, handlebar protection, doing my best to protect this bike as much as I can for when I inevitably drop it. The other thing that drew Fannie to this bike was that lovely seat. My solution to saving Fannie's now waterproofed seat, one of the issues Fannie had when we first got this seat is that these lovely Birmingham added stitches meant that there were thousands of little holes in the seat, and after we went for a ride in the rain, her bottom was soggy, and it's a lovely looking branded seat here, but it was not waterproof. So I waterproofed the seat, and it actually gave it this really nice kind of chocolate finish to it. But I think Fannie would be very upset if I come back from green laning and have that seat be split. So my buddy, who has the Sinus, gave me this Mutt Mongrel, also Mutt branded, Mutt Mongrel seat that has seen better days. It's pretty ragged and pretty miserable around the edges. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that lovely seat off and put on the busted seat. But that seat will be replaced as well. I'm looking for side covers, but unfortunately the side covers are pretty hard to come by. I don't know why, but I'm looking for some side covers so that I can save those from any sort of damage as well. The vulnerabilities of the brake side are mirrored on the drive side, but the drive side doesn't have the exhaust protecting the levers and the foot peg back here. Although the brake has that long arch going underneath, that steel thing underneath, it doesn't look as vulnerable to breakage as this shift lever. The splined mount here I think is unique to these bikes. I'm going to pull my Honda one off of my CB125 and see if it's the same type of spline, see if I can get a kind of foldable off-road one. While I continue my research to see about getting a foldable one or more of a robust off-road one there, in the interim I've gotten myself a replacement one that I'll carry in my bag with some tools, and in case that snaps I'll be able to get home. Hopefully I'm going to be able to find some beater side panels, and then I will take it on its first and maybe last Green Lane adventure. Stay tuned for the modifications. If you like that video and you want to see more like them, hit like, share, and subscribe.